What's up, guys? John Stargarian here, and I want to talk a bit about my plays on tomorrow night's card. That's UFC Fight Night 171, Teixeira versus Smith. And yeah, so I'm just going to go through all my plays here. If you like the video, drop a like and subscribe. Any questions or comments, just leave them in the comment section or hit me up on Twitter, which is at MMA Fox. That's Fawkes. Alright, so first up, I have a play on Brian Kelleher, and I played Kelleher at plus 145, which, it's not the best number, all things considered, where the line currently is, which is Kelleher plus 170. I'm not going to expand that play anymore, but, pretty much my thinking is here, Hunter Ezra, he's got talent, he's shown good wrestling. He's apparently a four-time state champion. He showed good wrestling regionally and in his contenders fight. And to be honest, I was kind of leaning towards making a play on him up until I saw his fight with Katona, which I had bet him against Katona, but I'd kind of forgotten it. And then when I was taping this fight, just a lot of disconcerting stuff there. So, you look at Azura, and, he's, like I said, good wrestler. But outside of that, he's really, really raw. And so, he's got real nice leg kicks, but his striking with his hands leaves a bit to be desired. He's got power, no question about that. But, other than his power, his technique's pretty wild. He throws a lot of looping overhands. And in the Katona fight, Azura is allegedly an elite wrestler. And, I don't doubt it, but we saw Brad Katona, who was significantly smaller, push him up against the cage and hold him there for long swaths of that fight. It ended up being a really close fight, and Azura only actually landed 40 strikes across those 3 rounds. And we saw Katona get him down, too. And that was really concerning to me because I actually think Kelleher, he might not have the jiu-jitsu of Katona, but I think he's probably the stronger here. And so, I could easily see him doing the same thing in this spot. And then, on top of how green Azura is, Kelleher, I have some questions about his gas tank. He hasn't gassed per se, but he looked to be slowing down precipitously at the end of the Katona fight, and I actually sort of thought he was slowing down at the end of his contenders fight too. And so I could be wrong about this, maybe just optics, and maybe I was just thinking about it, but I thought he was slowing down, and for me, all of those things are kind of concerns here. Because first of all, Kelleher, I think he's kind of gotten a bad rap over the years, just because he's more known for his losses than his wins. But he's got a 4-3 record in the UFC. He's got victories over Renan Barão, Damian Stasiak, Yuri Alcantara. He beat Julio Arce in the not-too-distant past regionally twice. And, Arce, he's not a star, but he's a quality fighter. And so, Kelleher, though, he's known for being knocked out by Lineker and then, catching that elbow from Montel Jackson, and then being Darst. But, there's no shame in losing to either Lineker or Montel Jackson, who I personally think could be a future champion. And if you look at how Kelleher fights, he is hittable, which is a concern here because, as I mentioned, Azura hits with power. But he pushes a pretty heavy pace, and he's got great cardio. And like I said, I have some concerns about Azura's gas tank and how he'll deal with pressure. We saw him get pushed up against the fence fairly easily by Katona. And if Azura has struggles to throw, his leg kick's probably his best weapon, but if he's getting backed up, I don't think they're going to be as effective, and Kelleher tends to back everybody up. And then Kelleher's also got pretty good jiu-jitsu. He's been subbed a few times himself, but he's got good offensive jiu-jitsu, and he's got a great guillotine. So I'm not sure if Azura will shoot here, which is probably, his takedowns and his leg kicks are his best weapons, and I think they'll both sort of be neutralized. Maybe he will, but he'd be risking going into that guillotine. And even if he can take Kelleher down, first of all, Kelleher's got really strong takedown defense, about an 84% rate. But even if he can get him down, I'm not sure he can hold him there. And so basically, it's not so much that I'm fading Azura. I believe in his talent, and I think the kid's got a bright future. But as I mentioned, he's very raw. He's got a lot of things he needs to clean up going forward. And so, like I said, Kelleher's a crafty veteran. He's got great cardio. He's going to push a pace. I think, that pace could affect, Azura's leg kicks and could potentially, gas Azura out. And so consequently, I capped this near even. And so I didn't mind plus 145. Like I said, I'm not going to increase my exposure there just because I do think, first of all, the fact they're fighting at 145 pounds is somewhat concerning because Azura's a bigger fighter. And also, Azura is more physically talented. But I don't mind the spot for him. And so next up, we had Gabriel Benitez here taking on Omar Morales. and I played Benitez for 2 units at plus 155. And so, first of all, I know, Benitez is fighting up at lightweight for the first time, and he wasn't a particularly big featherweight. And Morales is a big lightweight. He's fought at welterweight before. And so, look, I'd be lying if I didn't say the size was a concern. Of course, it's a concern. But, when going through the tape and the metrics and just about everything about this fight, the best thing I could say about Morales for his advantage is size. And so it's not going to be grappling heavy. Like, maybe Morales could land takedowns if he tried, but that's not really his game. And Benitez's get-ups are pretty good, so I don't think he could hold him there. But I think Benitez is going to be better everywhere here. Like, Morales has power, but first of all, his best tool is probably his leg kick with his right leg. And it's not really going to be available against a southpaw and Benitez. And we saw him basically almost not throw kicks at all against Maestro in his last fight. And that's, so you take that away and it's like, okay, well, he's got real power, probably. He could come out there and just nuke Benitez in round one and win that way. And that wouldn't shock me. We've seen Benitez finish before. But it's like he probably has that kind of power to do that. But also, Dong Hyun Ma has got no chin left anymore. That guy gets knocked out by, like a leaf could blow into his face and he'd fall over. And, he couldn't really, outside of hitting a spinning wheel kick, he didn't really hurt Ma at all in that fight. And on top of that, I think he's got some really bad tendencies offensively. Like, he sits down way too hard on his punches in the pocket, first of all. And the result is, they're power shots. They're huge power shots. But they're pretty slow. And so I think they're going to be pretty easy to read for a guy like Benitez. And he also doesn't have great volume, to be honest. Again, the tape, there's not a ton of tape on Morales, but we have to assess what there is. And based on what there is, he beat Harvey Park basically just by kicking Park in the legs over and over again. And the Ma fight, there were huge swaths of that fight where he was just staring at Ma, especially in round two. He almost gave Ma that round Ma actually won it on one card because he basically just wasn't engaging. Round two of that fight, for instance, I'm just looking at the strike numbers now, Morales only landed 11 strikes. And he never landed more than 14 strikes in any round in that fight, 14 significant strikes. And it's like, that is a huge concern because, yes, he has the power advantage, but he didn't knock out Ma. And if he doesn't knock out Benitez here, and he's that, passive in the striking at distance, I think he's likely to lose this fight. Because, as I mentioned, so Gabriel Benitez is natural featherweight, but the guy has world-class defense, first of all. He's got a 71% striking defense. Which is remarkably elite, to be honest with you. And, he's a basic fighter, but he's incredibly good at getting reads in the boxing. Like, you actually saw in his last fight with Sadiq Youssef, who I'm quite high on. Youssef hit him a bunch early, and then he started to pick up on him on Youssef's jab and just started countering him hard. He did it over and over and over again until Youssef out of adjusted and knocked him out. But I kind of can see that happening here. Morales, for as basic as Benitez is, and it's true, he only really throws a left hand, left kick, and that's kind of really what he does. Occasional jab, but he doesn't use his right too much in the striking. I don't think Morales is some kind of diverse elite striker here. And so I look at it and I'm like, Benitez is going to be way faster. Like, there's no question there's a speed advantage. As I mentioned, Morales likes to sit down pretty hard on his punches. And so I think Benitez, he could get teed off on early, but I think if this goes, past the first couple minutes, I think he's going to be making reads on those, and he's just going to counter Morales. And, Benitez lands at a strong pace. It's 4.32 significant strikes per minute. I just kind of trust him. I think he's a little bit better everywhere. Like I said, maybe Morales could wrestle him, but I don't think he can hold him there. And so I just kind of feel like Benitez is going to win exchanges here, with some regularity. And I don't trust that Morales is going to keep pace or realize he's getting behind in the numbers. Like, you're having close rounds with Dong Hyun, Maestro Ma. That's concerning to me. And, maybe I'm misreading it. And like I said, Morales does have the ability to come out and knock Benitez out in round one. But I personally think Benitez, outside of size, is better wherever this fight goes. And so I capped him at about minus 122, or about a 55% implied odds. And so the plus 155 feels like a steal to me. We'll see what happens. Like I said, you never know. And Benitez is smaller, and Morales is huge. But, I feel pretty good about it. And if it goes to decision, I feel very confident. So I have 2 units on Benitez plus 155. Next up, we got Ciara Eubanks and Sarah Moras, and I have Eubanks as part of a parlay. Calculus here is pretty simple. Moras is terrible. I just plain and simple. Like, I know Eubanks has poor cardio. We've seen it in the past. We saw it against Betch Correa. But, this is just, it's a different level of fighter. Eubanks, it's kind of a tragedy because I do think in another life, if she was a little bit more disciplined and more willing to put the work in and make 125, I think she could have been a really good fighter because I like her boxing and she's got world-class grappling. Unfortunately, that's not the case, and so she's a little smaller, fighting at 135. But this is a matchup where I just don't see how Moras gives her much trouble. Moras' the best thing she offers is really submissions off her back. And, Eubanks is a Lloyd Irvin black belt. If she got subbed from guard, it would have to be when she's totally gassed out in round 3, which, it's possible, but I think, someone of her quality is just so much better at jiu-jitsu. It's so unlikely. And anywhere else the fight takes place, she's probably going to smash Moras. Huge volume edge, a lot more power, much better boxing. I think the line should be wider than it is. I wouldn't play it straight, but I actually parlayed it up with Ricky Simon for 2 units at plus 104. And so, yeah, pretty much just think Eubanks is better wherever it goes. Moras' only hope is maybe Eubanks gasses and she can catch her in something weird. But like I said, Eubanks is a responsible grappler. That seems really unlikely. So anyway, next fight I have cash on Marvin Vettori, and I'm actually pretty heavy on him here. It's 4 units at minus 165. And, when I initially jumped into the tape for this, I came out of it and capped Vettori about minus 175, so not really enough of an edge to, make a big bet. And, it was pretty evident to me that Vettori was better on tape. And then I dove a little bit more into the data on this fight, and it's really revealing to me, at least in my opinion it is. Obviously, I think we all knew that Vettori lands at a higher rate, but something that seems relevant is just a couple things here. First of all, head strike volume. Vettori attempts 8.5 head strikes a minute, as opposed to, the 4.4 Roberson attempts. He lands 3.3 a minute to Roberson's 1.96, and it actually, when it comes to defending them, Vettori's a bit better too. So, Vettori he absorbs about 1.43 head strikes per 15 or per minute, and he's faced 6.29. So it's a pretty good defensive ratio. It's about 75%, as opposed to Roberson, who's faced 3.91 and absorbed 1.14. So Roberson's absorbing a lot more head strikes than he is, or a much higher percentage of the head strikes thrown at him. And now I use head strikes just because those tend to score much better with the judges from an optics perspective, and that seems very relevant here, especially in a fight where, Vettori's going to be throwing more, is going to have a volume edge as it is. If he's got a big advantage in the head strike numbers, it implies, just that he's even more likely to get ahead with the judges. And then another thing that came up, and look, I knew Roberson was bad off of his back already, that was pretty evident in the tape. But if you actually look, Roberson's allowing 1.88 or 1.68 advances per takedown. That's horrible. It basically means he just lets people pass his guard like butter. And, it's evident on the tape, but Vettori's a black belt, and he's a pretty good wrestler. And if he takes Roberson down here, he's almost certainly just going to be able to keep him there and advance at will. And so that's a huge concern. And so beyond that, I've seen people say Roberson's an elite striker, glory kickboxer. Well, he was 0-3 in glory. And, I think the idea that just because he was a glory kickboxer makes him be a better striker than Vettori, maybe technically, but we saw Vettori fight Israel Adesanya, and over 3 rounds, he was only outlanded 57-46 in significant strikes. From distance, he actually held Adesanya to about 45% on his lands, which was pretty surprising given, the reach disparity there and the height disparity. And he doesn't have that, he's the same height as Roberson, and they have the same reach. And obviously, Adesanya is significantly a better striker than Roberson. Adesanya is one of the best strikers in the UFC. He was an elite glory kickboxer. And Roberson, he's okay. I think he's good. He's a plus striker. But it's just, again, I watched Vettori at least stay competitive with Adesanya in round 1 and win round 3, and actually out-attempt. He attempted 169 total strikes to Adesanya's 134, and then total strikes was only outlanded 67-60. it was hard to watch that and look at that, and then look at Vettori and the improvements he's made in the 2 years since that fight, and not think he's going to have a massive edge here, or maybe not a massive edge. I should rephrase that, but the idea that because Roberson is this kickboxer, he's going to have some kind of an edge. I actually think if this plays out on the feet in just a straight, MMA kickboxing match with no grappling took place, I'd give Vettori almost a 60% edge here. And the reason for that is, if you look at Roberson, where Roberson has an advantage is really, his kicks. Vettori's shown some susceptibility to leg kicks and not checking them, and Roberson is a vicious kicker. But first of all, Vettori likes to come forward. He's going to pressure, and it's much harder to land effective leg kicks when you have somebody in your face with pressure, and we really haven't seen Roberson have to deal with that yet. So it's impossible to say he'll be effective with kicks anyway against Vettori in the stand-up. And then the other part is volume. Like I mentioned, Vettori is more than double his volume in attempts, and that's just, I had thought I played Roberson against Kopylov pretty big as a underdog. And my assumption coming in, I'd said it in my breakdown at the time, was that we had seen Roberson was fairly low volume, but he'd also faced a bunch of grapplers, and it was likely suppressing his volume a bit, and I expected him to increase it against the kickboxer. And then we saw the Kopylov fight, and he won it, and don't get me wrong, he looked good in that fight, but his volume actually did not go up much at all. He only outlanded Kopylov in significant strikes, 43-37. And he was clearly the better fighter. The first round of that fight, he actually lost on all 3 cards. He only landed 9 significant strikes in the entire round. He gets into these things. That was the perfect time, too. There was no threat of the takedown. That was a perfect time for him to go and up the volume dramatically, and he just didn't do it. He lost the first round on all 3 cards. He battered the leg in round 2. But then round 3, before, he got aggressive and took Kopylov down, again, he was just being real inactive, and it was real close. And so it's like, Roberson, okay, sure, he's judicious and he's methodical in how he works, but you can't be methodical to the point where you're just letting your opponents get ahead on the striking. And seeing that with the fight with Kopylov, it makes me think that, I'm sure he'll work at a higher rate if Vettori's pushing a higher pace, but will he work at a high enough rate to keep up with Vettori? I really don't think so. I just don't see much reason to think that. And then, so I'd give Vettori a moderate edge on the feet, and then when you combine the fact that, Vettori is just the much better grappler. Vettori's a tremendous defensive grappler, and offensively, Vettori lands takedowns at a 57% rate, at a 45% rate, and if he can press Roberson to the fence, I think he can. Like Wellington Turman was able to consistently get into the clinch and drag Roberson down. I think he can get him down, and if he sticks to a takedown heavy approach here, I think his path to victory is almost like minus 400, because I don't think Roberson's going to get back up if he gets taken down. I think there's a good chance he'll get subbed. And so consequently, it's like, I had it minus 175, but when you look at all those stats and you contextualize everything from both of their careers to date and the improvements Vettori's making as opposed to Roberson, who seems pretty much stuck in quicksand, I have trouble not capping. I cap Vettori near 75% in this fight to win, which is about minus 300. I know a lot of people disagree with that and think this is going to be real competitive on the feet. And like I said, if it is competitive on the feet, that wouldn't shock me. I personally am skeptical it will be, but if it is, it wouldn't shock me at all. But like I said, even if Roberson's getting the edge, Vettori has such a big grappling advantage in my mind that he can fall back on it at any time. It's just hard for me to see Roberson winning two rounds with regularity. It could happen, but like I said, we're capping this by probability, not based on binary decisions here. So yeah, I have 4 units on Vettori minus 165. I think he's going to look great here. Next up, we got Ricky Simon, Ray Borg, and I'm very heavy on Simon here. So I played 3 units on Simon minus 150, and then I parlayed him up with Sijara Eubanks for 2 units. And I've seen a lot of people playing Borg here, and I just disagree with it very, very strongly. I don't totally understand it. I'm not going to it's very possible everybody else is seeing something that I'm not, but I don't think so. So there's a couple things. I think there's some recency bias for Ricky Simon. So he got knocked out by Uriah Faber, and then he lost his last fight to Rob Font. And so I think, he was a big prospect, and I think people are now souring on him very fast. And I actually still think very highly of Simon. he's not the best striker in the world, but it looked like he was actually improving quite a bit against Font. But he's a tremendous wrestler. So he doesn't have the college wrestling pedigree of some guys, but he wrestled in high school and then he went right into MMA. But his technique is really, nearly flawless. Like, he's a tremendous offensive wrestler and he's a tremendous defensive wrestler and he's a great scrambler. And when you look at him in this spot, he's got a massive size advantage against Ray Borg. Borg should not be fighting at 135 pounds. The only reason he is because he's had trouble making the weight at 125, and that's a discipline thing. But you look at it, and I can't help but think when people are looking at this fight and picking Borg, they're looking at the fight with Merab that Simon had, where Merab was able to kind of ragdoll him for 2 rounds. And I just think that's a horrible – I've seen people say it, and I think it's a horrible cop to Borg. First of all, I think people underrate Merab all the time. I think he's one of the best wrestlers in the UFC and one of the best 2 or 3 in that division. Like, the guy has made a career, if you go back and look at his career, even on the regionals, of just burying wrestlers. He's got great cardio. He's incredibly physically powerful. He's very much like the 135-pound Colby Covington. So that fight doesn't tell me much. And then you look at, but people see that and like, oh, Ray Borg, he fought Rogerio Bontorin and ragdolled him. Took Casey Kenny down 7 times. Look at all these grapplers Ray Borg's beat. And it's like, well, not really, because those guys aren't, like Gabriel Silva, Bontorin, Kenny, aren't really the kind of like physically imposing guys that have given Borg problems. And then I look at Simon, it's like, yeah, he got ragdolled by Merab, but he also fought Montel Jackson, who's probably one of the best prospects at 135 and one of the best wrestlers at 135, and he outgrappled Jackson for 3 rounds pretty handily, to be honest. And you go back and look at Borg's career other than those guys. They're all decent wrestlers, Bontorin, Silva, and Kenny, but none of them are great offensive wrestlers. And if you actually look when he's faced physically imposing guys, he's had a lot of issues. So if you go back and watch a Justin Scoggins fight, Scoggins actually was able to get him down pretty much at will. Took him down 6 times, didn't get taken down once. Basically, any time they ended up clinching up, Scoggins just much bigger and stronger and ragdolled him and then just ate him alive at range. And, we saw something similar when he fought Dustin Ortiz. Dustin Ortiz didn't take him down at will, but Ortiz was able to wrestle and out-scramble with Borg. And when he was able to match Borg in the grappling, Borg just didn't have anything else that fight. It was just very telling. He just outlanded him 46-12 on the feet in that fight. And that's been kind of the story of his career. Whenever Borg can't get a significant edge grappling, he loses. Like you look at the Demetrius Johnson fight. Now, Demetrius Johnson's all-time great, but again, Borg couldn't get his grappling going, and he only landed 13 strikes across 5 rounds in that fight. And so I kind of see that here because, first of all, I think Simon is just a better wrestler than Borg from a technical standpoint. I think it's very evident in the tape that Simon's technically better. And he actually attempts takedowns at a higher rate than Borg does, who attempts them at a higher rate himself. But second of all, Simon is so much bigger than Borg. He's only 2 inches taller, but he's physically built bigger. He's got 6 inches of reach on him. And so it's like, and like I said, he defends takedowns better. He's got 73% takedown defense versus Borg. Doesn't really defend him well at all. Borg for his career only a 50% takedown defense rating. And so I kind of think this is going to look like a lot like the Scoggins fight. Like, Scoggins is better striking than Simon. I don't think Simon's going to be able to just make sure Borg can never enter the pocket. But even if Borg can, Borg lands at such a low rate, 1.3 significant strikes per minute. He only attempts 2.72 a minute. It's just impossible to trust him to win any exchanges, like if he can get in there and they start swinging. And, his striking defense is only 46% as well. And Simon, he more than doubles the output of Borg. And he's got a 6-inch reach advantage. And like I said, I think from a wrestling standpoint, I've seen people like implying, maybe Simon's going to come and sprawl and brawl here. And I don't really understand why. Like, I get Borg's a good back taker. He hasn't submitted anybody since 2015, though. We're not talking about the Demian Maia of the flyweight division now moving up to bantamweight. It's not something where Simon makes one mistake, Borg's going to be on his back in his 2 seconds from finishing him. That's just not the case. Borg's an okay submission grappler, but he's far from elite. And Simon actually, if he does make a mistake and Borg can jump on the back, Simon does a great job of getting up and fighting hands on the way up. So I really don't think Borg's going to be able to backpack him at all, which makes me think, I'm not saying Borg couldn't land takedowns here. Maybe he could land a couple. But I actually think if Simon's smart, he'll come out with a grappling heavy approach. And I think he can take down Borg literally whenever he wants to. And even if Borg works back up, Simon's cardio is close to Borg's level as well. I just think he's going to be more physically imposing. And even if you were to tell me the grappling was a total wash, which I don't think it will be, I really don't think Borg has the tools to have consistent success in the grappling. I think I can rely on Simon to just outland him. Like, there's some chin concerns with Simon, to be sure, but we saw Simon get rocked by Rob Font over and over and over again in his last fight, and he seemed totally unfazed and just kept coming forward. So you're telling me Ray Borg, who's really got pillow hands, is going to hurt him? I'm not really buying it. The bookies have Borg at plus 480 inside the distance. So I'm not overly concerned about Borg finishing him. And for Borg to win this fight in a decision, it's going to have to be something where Simon makes a couple mistakes in the grappling transitions he doesn't normally make, and Borg jumps to a dominant position. And like I said, even then, I'm pretty confident that Simon can extract himself from it. And the volume is just, difference is so huge. Borg's most strikes he's ever landed in a fight in his career are 36. Like, that is, like I said, I think the physical size difference here is massive, and I think the output advantage for Simon is huge. So, maybe I'm misreading it. Maybe everybody else is right and I'm wrong, and Borg's going to be able to outgrapple Simon. But I personally don't see it. I think Simon's a much better wrestler, and I think he's a safe bet to be better on the feet too. And so I personally had this capped around Simon minus 300. So I got 3 units on Simon straight minus 150, and I have him parlayed up with Sijara Eubanks as well. All right, so next up we have Hernandez and Drew Dober. I have a play here as well. So it's an interesting fight. I initially thought I was going to play Dober, to be honest, and then I kind of did like a deeper dive on Hernandez because I remembered really liking him going into the Cerrone fight. And then I soured on him quite a bit. I soured on him more after the Trinaldo fight. And I took a couple things away from that before I went even deeper into his tape. But initially, I was like, oh, the Cerrone fight messed up his head. He came out and just didn't show up for the Trinaldo fight. But on second watch, and after listening to what his corner was saying, it seems like what he was trying to do with Trinaldo, like one of the mistakes he kept making with Cerrone was coming in on a linear line. Like, he'd move around a lot on the outside, but on his way into the pocket, he'd stay on the same line, and Cerrone just kept hitting him with the knee over and over. And it seemed like he was actively looking to avoid that against Trinaldo, who's an elite counterpuncher. And it seemed like what he was trying to do was just feint and bait out Trinaldo's left hand so he could counter that. And Trinaldo just stayed patient and never threw it, and so what we got was a staring contest. He also, he tried to wrestle Trinaldo very early in that fight, and Trinaldo shoved it off like it was nothing, so I think it changed up the game plan a bit. And so my takeaway from that was, look, I would have preferred he had upped the output a bit in that fight, just for my own confidence here. But we saw Hernandez, really, he stuck to a game plan at least. And then I went back and I looked at his OAB, the fight with OAB again, and I went back and I looked at his regional tape, and I had soured on him, but I actually think he might have a bright future, to be honest. So first of all, I'd only recall him attempting takedowns really against Aubin Mercier in the UFC, where he attempted them in volume and landed 4. But on the regional scene, he was attempting 4 to 6 takedowns a fight. And so when I initially was going through this, it was like, oh yeah, he's probably not going to attempt takedowns in any volume. Dober should probably be okay. But I'm actually thinking now he may attempt a lot. It's kind of his bread and butter. And if you actually heard him in his media scrum, he mentioned he had it's the first fight he's had in the UFC where he's got a significant advantage somewhere. And I have to imagine he means wrestling. And, while Dober's get-ups are pretty good, he doesn't defend takedowns the best, like initial takedowns. And while I don't think Hernandez is great at holding guys down, what he has shown us when he's wrestled is the ability to stay on somebody. Like, he's not just going to disengage and go back to range and play the range game. He's going to stay on you and to take you down again. And I really think he's going to be able to do that here. And then even beyond that in the striking, I've seen people say that Dober's just going to light him up. And maybe. I think it's within, the range of possible outcomes. But Dober's a pretty, he's a good striker. I actually played him against Azrat. But, he's kind of wooden. And by that I mean, he's been fighting Muay Thai forever. He's got a lot of power. He can bang. But he doesn't really, his movement's not great. Dober wants to kind of stand still and wants you to come to him and brawl with him or go forward and brawl with you. And when he gets you, when you can get lured in that fight, he can put you out and he knows he can land the output to beat you. But I don't think he's not very fast, and I think he might, if Hernandez goes back to what he did regionally and what he's did basically anytime he stood or the first 2.5 minutes of the Cowboy fight and actually uses his movement on the outside, I actually think he could have some success standing. Like in a kickboxing match, I wouldn't favor him against Dober, but I also wouldn't say Dober should be some kind of like a 75% favorite either in that kind of a matchup. It's like I'd say if it stayed at range the entire fight, I'd probably favor Dober like 60 to 65%. But like I said, I think Hernandez can land on him. I think he can maybe fluster Dober with his movement a bit. And, he's still a young kid who's pretty smart and making improvements. And I also, I think he's going to know he's got a wrestling edge here. And I think he's going to come out with that tenacity we saw in the OAB fight and we saw in the regional scene and just look to wrestle him. And, maybe Dober can finish him here. But I really think if Hernandez comes out with a wrestling first game plan and uses that movement to get inside and attempt takedowns, he's going to have some success. Like, if he comes out and attempts 10 takedowns and Dober doesn't just randomly catch him and finish him, I think he beats Dober here. And I think he beats him with some regularity if that happens. Now, I can't predict that he's going to come out and do that. So when capping, I can't just say that. But I do think he will have, based on, all of the cumulative tape we have, based on what he said, I think he's going to come out with elite and at least wrestle a bit. And so consequently, I think the striking exchanges will be close-ish, but favoring Dober. And I think, once he kind of gets the wrestling going, he's going to be able to kind of take over the fight or at least win rounds. And, that's the thing, if he stays on Dober while Dober's working up, that's a bad look for Dober. And so Dober's probably, at least the way I'm kind of seeing this playing out, is probably going to have to make up for that at range, which he could. But I think Hernandez's athletic upside is higher than Dober's is. And I think he has a much clearer path to victory than Dober does, to be honest. And so I favor, I have Hernandez at about minus 122, which is 55% implied. And so I played him for a unit. It evens here. And then next up, my last play of the night, I have Ben Rothwell by decision against Oven St. Preux. And so it's a weird fight. First of all, I don't think OSP should be fighting at heavyweight. He's even said he's not going to stay there. He's going to move back down to light heavyweight, which is kind of an odd thing to do, and it makes me think he's just kind of taking a paycheck during COVID. Because why would you let yourself balloon up to 245 if if your plan is not to stay there? But so basically, if you actually look at this fight, it's pretty straightforward analysis for me. St. Preux, basically his game plan since he fought Vulcan, really, the last time he put out any kind of output was against Vulcan, and that was back in 2017. Since then, he's had 7 fights, and the most strikes he's landed in a fight in that time was 38 against Dominic Reyes in a fight that was entirely at range. The second most strikes he's landed in a fight over that time was 23 against Corey Anderson. And basically what OSP does these days is he backs up to the fence. He doesn't really throw much output. He takes damage and either waits till his opponent gasses and he can throw in a meme sub or loses. That's pretty much it. The one time we've actually seen him try to flash aggressive grappling was against Nikita Krylov. And, he took Krylov down 3 times in the first round and probably won that round. And then the second round started, and he had literally nothing left. Was completely out of gas, got immediately taken down, passed, and finished. And so I think that's why he doesn't grapple very much. People are always wondering, well, why doesn't he grapple more? Well, I think it's pretty clear based on that fight that, his just doesn't have the gas tank for it, and he probably knows it. And so basically, you're kind of looking at the same thing here with Rothwell. He's going to probably back up and just kind of show up and just kind of look for openings or hope Rothwell tires himself out. And, maybe he'll try to grapple here, but like I said, I don't think it's going to be a grappling heavy game plan because I think if he does that, he's likely to gas. And I don't think, Rothwell looks like a caveman. He works like he's a truck driver, but I think his defensive grappling is at least responsible. His takedown defense is okay, and he's got a decent guillotine he could threaten with as well. And so, I don't think, even if OSP took him down, he's a locked in or just to pass his guard at will and then finish him. I don't think that at all. And I don't think he has the gas to do it more than once. So I don't think you can count on OSP to just come out and grapple heavy. And so Rothwell on the other side, Rothwell seems like he's totally shot at this point. And so playing him here is kind of weird. But the 2 things Rothwell has shown he will do since he came back from his suspension is march forward and throw volume. So his last 3 fights against Struve, he landed 58 significant strikes in 2 rounds before the KO. And against Arlovsky, even though he got teed off on that fight, he landed 70 significant strikes. And against Ivanov, he landed 70 significant strikes across 3 rounds. Let me just remind you guys, like I said, the most strikes St. Preux has landed in a 3-round fight across his last 7 fights is 38 significant strikes. Plus, he is going to see the center of the octagon to Rothwell happily. And so I just kind of feel like Rothwell is going to win minutes here with relative ease. Like, he's going to be able to back OSP up and just hit him at will. Now, that said, he might be able to finish OSP. St. Preux's durability has looked like it's been going for some time. He's been hurt in numerous fights. But also, until Rothwell went crazy and just started swarming like a wild man against Struve, he hasn't looked like he's packing the biggest punch. And even though St. Preux has been hurt a few times, he generally seems to be able to kind of survive. And so, yeah. So, I mean, he could finish him, which would kill this bet. And on the other side of the octagon, OSP could land one of his patented head kicks or land a big counter and finish Rothwell. Like, that wouldn't be the craziest thing ever either. But ultimately, I really think that, the most likely outcome of this fight is Rothwell winning by decision. And that line's currently plus 460. And so I've played a unit on it. And I think it's got a ton of value because I think Rothwell's chance to KO is, I don't think it's very high. I think it's probably like 20, 25%. And I actually favor Rothwell in this spot, and I actually priced this closer to like 30%. And so getting, plus 460 just seems like a great deal to me. So yeah, I'm playing Rothwell decision plus 460 for a unit. And yeah, I mean, that's what I've got here for this card, guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If so, please drop a like. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe and follow me on Twitter at MMA Fawkes. That's FAWKES. And I hope you guys turned in for the Club and Sub podcast last night. If you didn't, you can find it on GK the Fight Analyst YouTube page. And we'll be doing it again on Friday night for Saturday's card. And I'll have a link sent out on Twitter where you can watch that live or watch it after. But anyway, guys, thanks for stopping by. And Wednesday fights. I'm freaking pumped. Let's enjoy it. Thanks. Bye.